Today I'm going to show you how to use a circular hand knitting needle to manage stitches on a knitting machine, moving them, taking them off, and putting them back. Now I'll let the picture back out and show you the whole process, but I wanted to introduce it with this close look. I'm making a pattern that requires emptying needles and then moving the stitches together. And the pattern actually calls for removing the stitches on waste yarn. Another way that it could work is to remove them onto a garter bar and move them together. And I'm using a third method that's less common. I'm removing them onto a circular knitting needle. Let me show you what I've done. It's a slim steel needle, and I put any old thing for a temporary stopper on the opposite end. I don't want to get a surprise. It's a slim steel needle, and I put any old thing for a temporary stopper on the opposite end. I don't want to get a surprise. So now it's very easy to lift the stitches off onto my needle in order. I can slide it through 3 or 4 of them, and because this is a slim needle, I can just pull the needles out manually like that, or I can lift 3 or 4 of them at a time right off the needles. Right now I still have my weighted cast-on comb on. Shortly I will need to remove it. I've got actually 2 of them on, one left and one right. And it helps to keep from dropping stitches, of course. But eventually it's too much weight for the stitches and it increases the hazard. I'm not to the increased hazard yet. I'm going to move the camera and give you a little bit different view. Right about now, I'm beginning to feel that I could easily drop these stitches and lose control of my needle. So off comes my cast-on comb on the right. And here it goes, being set aside. Now, just as with waste yarn or a garter bar, because the stitches will be held, I'll be able to set this aside if I need a break from the work or need to use the machine for something else. I like the method very much for getting work off of the machine, because you can actually watch the point of the needle enter each stitch and know for sure that it's where it belongs. As with all methods, it pays not to rush. And I can do what I just did, pull the needle all the way through so all my held stitches are on the cable, and I really don't need to worry about that batch anymore. I've zoomed way in for the next few stitches, and I'm going to kind of lift as I go so you can watch it happening. There we go. So on across I will go until all of the stitches are on my circular needle. Here's the work, all off of the machine, and there are spaces where stitches were moved, and we will just not count the spaces, rehang on the correct number of needles. Here's where my stopper did its job. And now, since I have decided I will hang from right to left, I'm removing the stopper and putting it on the other end. This is just one of those paper clamps with a piece of cloth added to it to make it thick enough to do the job. I have also used fancier stuff, such as a rubber band wrapped round and round the needle, or push the needle through an eraser or other soft piece of rubber. Nothing fancy. You just don't want to give the stitches permission to jump off the end that you're not working with. It's important not to get your orientation confused, which can happen if you get up and move away from the work. The purl side was facing me. I still want the purl side to face me, so I need to hang in this manner. Since we approach them all from the same direction, stitch orientation should not be a problem. They should all be turned the same way. And I can just take them one at a time off of the needle that is holding them and put them onto machine needles. If the stitch starts to close up, as that one did, just giving the holder a little bit of an upward tug, as you just saw me do, lengthens it again to put it back on. Here are the reasons that I use this method. Number one, I don't have a garter bar for this machine. See them getting a little bouncy? I'm going to bring my claw weight into action. That'll help me not to drop as I go across. So I don't have a proper garter bar. The pattern really calls for the use of waste yarn. And waste yarn is the safer way, I think, to do this, although this is pretty safe if you pay attention. I think, personally, this is not as fast as a garter bar, but is faster than waste yarn for me. We all vary in how we do it. Plus, I just don't like rehanging from waste yarn, a little peculiarity of mine. I do it at times, but in this case, I like this better. It is possible to get good at it and put a multi-pronged tool into multiple stitches. I advise against it, though. I've decided it's not worth the extra speed and efficiency because so many more times I've dropped a stitch that I thought was situated properly. Now, if I get concerned about these, I can put them behind the needle latches and bring the needles all the way forward, and that adds a layer of security. As long as you are in control, right here, tip of the holder needle, when you pick it up, this is the moment you could mess it up. But if you're paying attention and your eyesight is good enough for this, it's pretty safe. There's nothing in my mind really superior about one method of rehanging and holding stitches over another. It's just nice to have alternatives. So this is to be recommended if you're not very pleased with your other alternatives or you don't have all the alternatives. I can't imagine any of us knitters not having the access to waste yarn, but it's pretty common not to have a garter bar for every machine you own. It's also, I have a little confession to make, possible not to be very good at the garter bar. That is not one of my best skills. But in probably 5 more minutes at the most, my entire span will be rehung on the correct needles, and I can resume my knitting.